Well, I'm Jonathan Worsley, and on this FHS podcast, I'm delighted to have Eddy Tannous, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Rotana Hotel Management, one of the Middle East's largest and most respected hospitality companies. Eddy, just great to have you with us. What we really love about Rotana is seeing a hotel company in the region from Abu Dhabi going global and being successful. We love supporting that sort of initiative. But Eddy, great to have you with us on this podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you, and it's great to be here.
Now, Eddy, you and I were supposed to have a little chat at FHS Saudi, which didn't happen, and we're now having this podcast now. Tell us about FHS Saudi and how was it for you?
Jonathan, FHS never disappoints, to be honest with you. It's always a great opportunity I like to think of FHS Saudi as a more boutique opportunity to have quality conversations. The bigger trade shows, whether they are B2C or B2B, are good as well. But when you have an opportunity to have meaningful conversations with the stakeholders in a slightly smaller setting, but good quality conversations, it's always a good return on your investment, if you want to put it this way. So this year, if I, reflect back, this was a few weeks ago now, but we had some really meaningful conversations. We had the right stakeholders present. I think since the change that FHS did a few years ago, we now have conversations not only with investors and hotel owners, but we have the opportunities to meet with F&B consultants. We have the opportunity to meet with some suppliers, not too many of them, which is great because it's just the right amount of suppliers that you want to talk to as well. So in general, the show, I think, was very, very good. You always have a bit of a soft start and then a very big second day, and then things kind of alleviate on the third day, and we saw that as well. I think there were some really good conversations in the panels. I enjoyed our panel, and it was interesting because it was the last panel of the third day, and it was still, in my opinion, a really nice conversation, a really interactive conversation, and you saw that with the attendance as well. So congratulations! I think it was another successful FHS, and we really got value out of it.
Fantastic. Well, that's great to hear, Eddy. But now tell us a little bit about your experience. You've been now with Rotana for the last roughly 2 years, and you've worked with the international hotel chains. So what's the fundamental difference between working for a much smaller company like Rotana versus one of these international global brands, and how leadership is different as well?
The fundamentals of hospitality, I think, are the same. They're not changed. It's about stakeholder management, and it's about, those key stakeholders. However, being in a smaller company gives you advantages that I believe you can use that you don't necessarily have with the bigger corporations. I think the key to managing any organization is finding those sweet spots, finding the advantages that you can maneuver with that other bigger brands don't have. If I want to state some, we always like to say we're in the hotel business and bigger organizations are in the business of hotels. And both models work really well. But what does that mean really? If you think of what you need to do in order to be successful, you need to manage stakeholders. And let's talk about hotel owners, for example, Jonathan. Operating in Saudi Arabia requires quick and nimble decision-making. It requires quick and nimble support to the hotels sometimes because the landscape changes very, very quickly. What I have found out in the last couple of years is that being in a smaller organization makes the decision-making process a lot smoother, a lot easier, and gives you that edge, gives you that opportunity to move faster. And in a landscape that's like the one we're witnessing today in the whole Middle East, but especially in Saudi Arabia, I think that's a big strength. There's so much competition. There's so much interest into entering the market and growing the portfolio in the market. And I think, and I'm starting to feel also, that this ability to make these decisions very, very quickly and to make this impact very quickly is paying off for us in those relationships in the market.
And you must also really focus on the fact that you're a local brand as well. and you have that local community. You've got those touch points with the various local communities in the Middle East.
Absolutely. We'd like to think of Rotana as, yes, a local/regional brand, but with a global mindset. And, I can talk to you about a lot of the things that we've done in the last couple of years that focus on that global mindset aspect of things. But going back to your question, yes, being part of this region is a key unique selling point that we need to continue emphasizing on. Whether you're talking about the international traveler coming into this region and wanting to experience something of this region, but also in terms of understanding the culture, in terms of how we deal with owners, in terms of how we deal with our talent. Talent in Saudi Arabia is probably one of the most important things you need to focus on. So when you are from the region and you understand that fabric, it's a huge plus. And yes, I think as Rotana, I believe this is one of our biggest strengths.
Biggest strength, but also probably your biggest challenge as well, because I would imagine you're pretty much responsible for delivering on the pipeline. So once the developers bring in the hotels in your pipeline, by the way, how many in your pipeline at the moment?
In our pipeline in Saudi Arabia, we have about 13 hotels now. So we have 12
hotels
operating and 13 in the pipeline.
So
which accounts for about 30% of our total pipeline as well as a company.
Okay. And you're responsible for, of course, making sure you've got the staff to manage those properties.
Absolutely.
Which must be a big challenge.
It is a big challenge. I'll tell you what we've done to mitigate that challenge, Jonathan. Saudi Arabia is a very important region for us. Today, if you look at Rotana, a big part of our inventory, or I would say 40% of our inventory, is in the UAE, between Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Northern Emirates and Al Ain. The second largest is definitely going to be Saudi Arabia in the next 2 to 3 years. And of course, we are all over the GCC in Qatar, Bahrain, all the other countries, and extending to Africa and Eastern Europe.
What about Egypt?
Egypt, we currently have 4 properties, including 2 operational, 1 in transition. It will be a franchise, a huge 1,000 key hotel in Sharm el-Sheikh, which would be our second there. And we're opening our landmark in Cairo, in the new Cairo district, the new area, expected to open by Q1 of 2027. So yes, we are growing outside of our inception point, but Saudi Arabia has a very specific focus for us. And going back to that risk of how can you maintain the promise, right? How can you continue delivering on your promise as you start getting bigger as a company? We've deployed resources in Saudi Arabia, and we continue to do so, different from what we've done in other regions. So we just hired an area vice president based in Saudi Arabia and focused on Saudi Arabia. He's area vice president of operations, someone who knows the market very, very well. And then with him, we have a team that's being deployed. So we have a commercial team based in Saudi Arabia that assists the hotels, but also works inbound and outbound. We have an HR team based in Saudi Arabia, also focused on assisting the 12 hotels that we have there. This, Jonathan, is in addition to the hotel teams. This is a corporate support team, but based in the field rather than being based in Abu Dhabi, which is how we used to do things before we got much, much bigger. We have a developer in Saudi Arabia, someone you know very well and who's always at FHS. So extending ourselves outside of Abu Dhabi, when you talk about countries like Bahrain or Qatar or Egypt, we're still able to support that from Abu Dhabi, but of course with a hotel-based area vice president in some of the regions. But in Saudi Arabia, we're using a different approach. We're kind of creating that satellite office for us in Saudi, which again will help us be very quick in reacting to the needs of the business.
And also makes that expansion probably sustainable, not just about being fast, but being something you can deliver on.
100%. Fast and expansion, as you know, is a huge risk, because if you leave gaps behind, then you only sometimes get one chance at proving yourself in the market. And, I refer back to what you said, some of the challenges, there is always a perception that international brands are safer or better or flashier. And that perception is changing. There's a lot more growing trust in regional brands now, because at the end, it's all about delivery. It's all about those results. So even our third-party partners, the consultancies, when they sit with owners and when they look at, market data and market statistics, we're very proud of what we've achieved so far. On the flip side, just like we have advantages, of course, there are disadvantages of being small. So how do you mitigate that? And if you look at what we've done in the last 2 years, one of the biggest things we've done in the last couple of months was signing up to be part of the Global Hotel Alliance. So our homegrown Rotana Rewards is going to evolve into being Rotana Discovery, which is part of the Global Hotel Alliance. And suddenly, you move from having 800,000 members that are predominantly based in this region to 33 million members that are based all over the world. Immediately, you move from providing your customers or your guests with the ability to redeem their points or their dollars in 80 hotels in this region versus 1,050 hotels worldwide, including luxury resorts all the way to economy hotels. So with those initiatives, it gives us the opportunity to compete with the larger brands in the area where they are strong already without losing our advantages, the quick reaction and being closer to our owners and being in the hotel business versus the business of hotels.
Yeah. And just going back to Saudi then, how are you, what are you looking at the moment? Are you looking at the regional markets to develop, or are you in Jeddah? Riyadh is your focus? Give us an idea of what your plan is for Saudi.
Yeah, Riyadh is its own economy by itself. Riyadh, there's so much focus from the local authorities, from the government on Riyadh. And, the ambition is basically to make it the largest Middle Eastern or the largest Arab city in terms of size and in terms of components. So you have to be focused on Riyadh. And we are, of course. What we have also started seeing in the last, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 months, is a renewed focus on the Eastern province, which has been missing. Since post-COVID, there's been so much focus on Riyadh, which I think was great and amazing, but it has impacted the Eastern province. And the good news is, the authorities have been listening to us, the private sector, but also to the tourism authorities based out of the Eastern province. And the last 4 or 5 months, we're seeing renewed focus, creating some, I don't want to say things that are not yet public or that are not yet official, but creating demand drivers to those regions, but also to support the growth of the industry itself. And we've seen that renewed focus on Jeddah as well, which has been missing for a few years. So if you look at the key markets outside of holy cities, which is its own economy and which has been doing extremely well over the last 3-4 years and continues to grow, and I think will continue to grow. Riyadh, Jeddah, and Khubar, with Riyadh obviously being at the forefront, but those being the key cities. But we are very interested in Asir. We have at least 3 or 4 projects and discussions happening in Asir. We are in constant contact with the Prince of Asir, who was, by the way, at FHS Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. And I had the opportunity to say, to speak to him on the side of our panel discussion. And he has been leading a very robust strategy to develop the sector in Asir. So, and that's something that will always stimulate the interest from, companies like ours, but every other hotel company to focus on that, because the Asir and that province has so much to offer that is very different from Riyadh, from Jeddah, from Khubar, from the nature.
Completely different. Completely different.
Yeah.
And absolutely stunning as well.
And that's what people probably don't know much about Saudi Arabia. Is it's such a diverse country. There's so much. You have the Red Sea area from Jeddah all the way to the new Red Sea project. You have places like Al Ula, where you have 5,000 years of civilization. You have the big city of Riyadh. You have the softer side of Eastern province, and then you have Asir and Abha and Al Baha. So Asir is definitely an area that we're focused on. But we have projects in tertiary cities like Al Baha, which is a couple of hours away from Ta'if, Again, beautiful, 2,000 meters above sea level, picturesque destination, more of a summer destination currently. I guess, Jonathan, what's going to be very interesting to see is how the demand for the market evolves over the next 5 to 7 years. Currently, because Saudi Arabia has, a significant population, and because this population is very interested in staycations and in spending time in hotels, which is what we've seen since COVID, it has been self-sustainable for the time being. But as the industry continues to grow from a supply standpoint, and with all the removal of restrictions on visas, and honestly, the experience you get at the airport today in Riyadh is far better than what it used to be 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. And all that is an infrastructure built up for creating demand from the outside world. In every single World Trade Show, we see a huge presence for Saudi Arabia, both inside the trade show, in the airport, and on the streets. And at some point, this is going to start stimulating real demand once the supply is ready. So it will be interesting to see which markets are going to be the key markets contributing into Saudi Arabia, if there will be the same markets we have today in the UAE, for example, or it will be other markets like the US. And you were going to have to adapt and, continue adapting to these markets.
And also you've got all these mega events coming through, like FIFA 2034, which has its own challenges, of course, because you don't want to build a hotel just for one event either. But of course, these events need plenty of hotel rooms as well. So
true. I mean, the good news is we've seen this already a couple of times in this region. So I remember being part of one hotel organization back in Doha when we did the 2006 Asian Games. And I remember we saw this huge ramp up in demand, and there was a cliff afterwards because obviously you need the supply of rooms to satisfy the demand for that specific event. And then we've seen World Cup in Doha, which was an improvement in my opinion. I'm not as worried for Saudi Arabia, to be honest with you, because if you look at the market now, we have cities that are running 70% occupancy year round already. And so the market is maturing. Yes, there will be a significant increase in supply to satisfy what is, the requirements of the World Cup. But by the time we reach World Cup, and with, again, going back to all the ease of restrictions, the ease of, facilitating the visa process, the expansion of the airports, Jeddah Airport today is fantastic. And we know that the Riyadh Airport will be also amazing coming up. I think, there will be a certain level of, parallel growth between demand and supply leading to that event, which, in my opinion, will not create a void straight after the event. Yes, there could be a dip for a certain period of time, but I don't think it's going to be as substantial as it was at the Asian Games in 2006, or maybe even in the Doha World Cup.
Your session that you had moderated by Scott Antel on management contracts, Frenching third-party management companies, I think you were the lone hotel operator on the stage, or the lone hotel operator brand on the stage, where the others were third-party management companies. And I noticed that you had a couple of objections to some of the questions, like the some of the global brands sort of losing their way when it comes to management, and it's all a franchise-driven model nowadays, particularly in America and in Europe, and developing in the Middle East as well. Where do you sit on that whole puzzle between? I mean, I consider you to be a management company, but I know you are also developing the franchise side as well and working with third-party management companies. So when do they come into play within Rotana?
I'll go back to the big brands, if you'd allow me, and then I'll talk about Rotana. During COVID, I was part of a big brand, one of the biggest in the world. And at the time when we were trying to get through COVID, we started comparing our financial position to the other big brands. And it was very clear immediately that the brands that had a bigger franchise portfolio were more resilient than the brands that didn't. So I think, Jonathan, franchise is inevitable as a concept if you want to grow your portfolio and if you want to grow in a sustainable, more resilient way. But I guess what my apprehension was during the conversation is, when will this region be fully ready, completely ready for the model that today exists in the United States, or North America to call it, and Europe? And I don't think we're there yet. I think owners today are very passionate about their hotels here. It's not a balance sheet item. They're still passionate. Yes, it used to be in the past that owners didn't care as much about the returns. They wanted the trophy. It's not the same anymore. Owners today are a lot more educated on return on investment. They're a lot more focused on the return on investment, but they still have a great deal of passion. They want to be involved and they want to be in the day-to-day. And so franchising at the end of the day presents an opportunity, but it also presents a risk if you don't have the right franchise partner. Now, these third-party management companies that were with me on the panel are our partners. They are the right partners that we should be working with. But we need to find the sweet spot, because at the end of the day, I worry about false promises. I worry about us telling the owner, and when I say us, I'm not talking about Rotana, I'm talking as an industry, telling the owner that, you can get a third-party management company and the franchisor, and you're still going to make more money, I think is an overstatement. I think franchise has to be, again, sniper rifle approach. There will be projects where it makes a lot of sense to have a franchise and a third-party management company. And in those projects, the franchisor has to compromise on their fees, because at the end, the owner is not going to pay double. And the management company has to make money as well. But why would we do it? Because it makes sense. Because, for example, this is in a region where we don't have the reach or we don't have the resources, like Pakistan, for example. We're opening a great hotel in Islamabad, and our relationship with the owners is amazing, to be honest with you. And our relationship developed, and this is a franchise, with one of those third-party operators that were with me on the panel, and we're very happy about that. But that relationship evolved with the owner to a point where they said, why don't you guys come and manage for us? And we said, no, we prefer that we continue doing it this way. It's better for you, Mr. Owner. And this was my point on the panel. There will be situations where it's not going to make financial sense for the owner, because they're going to be paying double, and I'm more than capable of doing it, or operating this hotel in this market. So this is the kind of conversation I think we need more honesty. I understand if I was one of these third-party management companies, I want to get more hotels into my portfolio, more critical mass. So I get that. But there's a big risk of promising things that are not going to materialize, and we ruin the whole process in the next 2-3 years. So it needs to be done in conjunction, and it needs to be well communicated, in my opinion.
Although there has been some good studies on this. HVS has put out on their global study the performance of third-party franchised properties, or a net profit increase of around 15-17% or so.
I struggle. I mean, again, I would like, if I see these numbers, I'd like to see which sample size are we looking at. What are the hotels that we're discussing? It's a very generic statement. So it could be that for a certain sample size, if we've taken 10 hotels and we've compared that return after 2-3 years of a third-party management company, I found it to be, a very generic approach to numbers. I mean, listen, if I want to be very objective about this, and I want to think about what can be saved, or what's the saving that we can provide owners if a third-party company is managing, unless we as a management company haven't been doing a good job, I struggle to find significant amounts of saving. And that's the reality. And especially post-COVID, even with the luxury brands, Jonathan, today when you talk about the ratio of employee per key, it used to be at 2.5 and 2.7 for luxury brands. And I know of luxury brands in Dubai today that are operating close to 1 per key. And I'm talking about big names, because people have adapted to the new way of doing things. So if that work has already been done, I struggle to understand where else this is going to come from. Because if you compare franchise fees with management fees, is, not that huge difference. And then you add on top of it the management fees that the third party company is gonna be making. So I do trust what HVS sends out. I think they're very serious about their numbers. I think there's definitely situations where it makes sense for the business and it makes sense for the owner, but a blanket approach, I'm not in favor of.
Yeah. Okay. No, understood. Yeah, I mean, you're perfectly aware of what we're doing with our entry into branded residences as an event-based business with BRF World in Dubai last year. This year we had streams in Saudi. We're in Bangkok in 2 weeks' time with BRF Asia. What's Rotana doing in this interesting space that's going to double in the next 5 years in terms of number of units globally?
We see the potential for sure. The good news is we already have one of our 6 brands is Rotana Residences. And we have an excellent example to showcase in Abu Dhabi, around the beach Rotana, which was our first and one of our biggest properties so far. We have the branded residence component. People have bought in to they've built that trust with the hotel brands, and people with the disposable income want that. I don't want to call it luxury. They want that accessibility to a hotel brand. They want that assurance that where they live, they're gonna get the service of a hotel. They're gonna get the attention. They're gonna get whatever a hotel brand brings in. And I think, Jonathan, because if you look at the nature of our jobs, I travel a lot, even if I wasn't working for the hotel business. This is where I live my life. I live my life in hotels. So I become accustomed to a certain level of service, but also availability of resources or services around me when I travel. So when I go back home and I want to, continue my life, I want to have those available to me. So for maybe a little bit of a premium, I'm willing to pay that premium in order to have that brand assurance and that brand offering. So I think branded residences will continue being successful. They will continue growing, and the demand will continue to grow. I remember conversations I had in Saudi Arabia back in the years when I worked there, and some of the conversations I had with the affluent Saudi locals is that they didn't want to live in the big villas anymore and the big houses with the big walls. They wanted to live in a nice apartment, but they wanted the luxury, they wanted the reliability, they wanted the brand association. And I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, I'd say it's an interesting place, isn't it? And whether it's co-located or not with a hotel. I think if not, probably more difficult, of course, because then you need that community, you need those services around that particular residence.
We had that argument. I want to say that argument started probably 7 or 8 years ago, because especially the big brands or the luxury brands, if I would say so, because I think most of branded resi right now is related to luxury brands because there's that brand value that comes in. Premium and luxury, I want to say, but not economy and mid-scale brands. And the debate was initially those big brands I would never operate a branded residences unless I have an anchor hotel to provide all the services. But I think, Jonathan, we've learned throughout the last couple of years is that the expectation is different. People who are in their homes don't want you to be in their face every single day like you are in a hotel. They want to know you're there somewhere. And yes, they're going to reach out to you for some services, but it's not a full-fledged service. So it can be done. And in my opinion, it doesn't need to be attached to a hotel.
Interesting. Well, listen, Eddy, we've spent our allocated time on this podcast, but just really great catching up and hearing about what you're doing at Rotana since you joined 2 years ago. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And progressing with Rotana, and look very much forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure, and looking forward to seeing you soon as well.